Please, just pretend you know me for 1 minute. The crystal chandeliers above the ballroom scattered golden light across hundreds of smiling faces, but Ava Bennett could barely breathe as she tightened her trembling arms around her 5-year-old daughter. Lily's small body burned with fever against her shoulder, her damp curls sticking to Ava's neck while laughter and champagne toasts echoed through the luxurious wedding reception like a cruel reminder that everyone else in the room belonged there except her. Ava moved quickly past tables draped in white roses and silver candles, trying not to attract attention in her black catering uniform. Her sneakers squeaked softly against the polished marble floor as panic clawed deeper into her chest. Lily had been fine 2 hours ago. A little tired maybe, but still smiling while coloring beside the kitchen staff. Then suddenly came the shaking chills. The fever. The weak little whimper that made Ava's stomach drop in terror. She had already called her babysitter 3 times with no answer. Her phone battery sat at 2%, and the nearest urgent care clinic was nearly 20 minutes away. Mommy. Lily's tiny voice cracked weakly against her shoulder. I don't feel good. I know, baby. Ava kissed her daughter's forehead and nearly panicked at how hot her skin felt. I'm trying. Around her, waiters floated between wealthy guests carrying trays of champagne, while a live string quartet played near the massive staircase. The entire ballroom smelled like expensive perfume and fresh flowers. Somewhere near the dance floor, the bride laughed loudly as guests gathered for photographs. Ava spotted the hotel exit down the hallway beyond the ballroom doors and hurried faster. But before she could reach it, Lily suddenly coughed hard against her shoulder. The sound turned several heads. Ava froze. One of the wedding coordinators immediately shot her an irritated look. Staff should remain in service areas. The woman snapped under her breath before forcing another smile toward the guests. Heat flooded Ava's face. Of course, sick children didn't belong in places like this. Poor single mothers definitely didn't belong. Either. I'm sorry, Ava whispered automatically, clutching Lily tighter as humiliation burned through her chest. She turned quickly toward the hallway, but her vision blurred for a second from exhaustion. She hadn't slept properly in days after picking up double shifts to cover rent. Her foot slipped slightly on the marble floor. Panic surged through her as Lily nearly slid from her arms. And before she could think, Ava reached out blindly and grabbed the sleeve of the nearest man standing beside the ballroom entrance. Please, she whispered desperately. Please pretend you know me for 1 minute. My daughter needs help. The words spilled out before she could stop them. For one horrifying second, silence seemed to swallow everything around her. Then the man slowly turned toward her. Ava's breath caught instantly. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. Dark hair streaked slightly at the temples. Sharp jawline. Calm gray eyes that locked onto hers with startling focus. He didn't look annoyed. He didn't even look confused. He simply studied her face like he was trying to remember something important. Mommy. Lily whimpered again, her tiny fingers weakly clutching Ava's collar. The man's eyes immediately shifted to the little girl. Ava prepared herself for rejection. Men like him didn't stop for women like her. Wealthy strangers at luxury weddings definitely didn't abandon conversations for exhausted caterers carrying feverish children. But instead of pulling away, the man stepped closer. What happened? His voice was low, steady, calm enough that Ava almost broke down crying from relief right there in the middle of the ballroom. She has a fever, Ava whispered. I just need to get her outside before. Lily suddenly swayed weakly in Ava's arms. The man reacted instantly, one hand steadying Lily's back before she could slip further. His expression changed the second he touched her forehead. She's burning up. I know. Ava swallowed hard. I'm trying to get her to urgent care. Somewhere behind them, applause erupted near the dance floor as the bride called for Ethan Calloway to come give his speech. Several guests turned toward the ballroom entrance expectantly. Ava didn't notice the sudden whispers around them. She didn't notice the way nearby staff froze. But she did notice the strange shift in the man's face the moment his name echoed through the ballroom speakers. Ethan Calloway, the billionaire CEO himself. And somehow, instead of walking toward the wedding stage waiting for him, Ethan looked back down at Ava and quietly said, "Come with me." Then he took off his tuxedo jacket, wrapped it gently around Lily to shield her from the cold rain outside the glass doors, and walked away from the wedding without looking back. Cold rain slammed against the glass entrance of the Grand Crescent Hotel as Ethan guided Ava and Lily through the revolving doors and into the empty valet lane outside. The noise of the wedding faded behind them, replaced by distant thunder and the steady rush of city traffic below the Hilltop Hotel. Ava tightened Ethan's tuxedo jacket around Lily's small body while trying to process what had just happened. Guests inside had literally stopped talking when he walked out. Even the musicians had missed a beat. Yet Ethan Calloway did not seem concerned at all. He opened the back door of a sleek black SUV, waiting near the curb, and motioned carefully toward the heated interior. "Get her inside first," he said quietly. Ava hesitated. Every instinct she had developed over years of struggling alone screamed at her not to trust wealthy strangers, no matter how calm their voices sounded or how kind their eyes looked. But Lily shivered weakly against her chest, and the cold rain was getting worse by the second. Ava climbed into the SUV carefully, settling Lily across her lap as warm air surrounded them. The interior smelled faintly like cedar and expensive leather. Ethan closed the door gently before circling toward the driver's seat. As soon as he stepped behind the wheel, his phone immediately began vibrating through the speakers. One call after another. Ava caught flashes of names lighting up the dashboard screen. Mom. Olivia. Best man wedding planner. Ethan silenced every single one without answering. "You do not have to do this," Ava said softly as he pulled away from the hotel driveway. "Your family probably needs you back there." Ethan kept his eyes on the rain-soaked road ahead. "My family will survive one missing speech. But it is your sister's wedding, and your daughter can barely keep her eyes open." His answer came calmly, almost too quickly, and something about it made Ava fall silent. Downtown Seattle blurred past the windows in streaks of gold and gray, while Lily whimpered softly in her sleep. Ethan adjusted the heat higher without saying anything. A few minutes later, he glanced briefly into the rearview mirror. "How long has she had the fever?" "About an hour." Ava brushed damp curls away from Lily's forehead. "She was fine before my shift started." "Did she eat today?" Ava hesitated just long enough for him to notice. "A little." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly, but he did not push further. The silence between them should have felt awkward. Instead, it felt strangely steady, like the inside of the SUV existed outside normal time. Ava caught herself watching the reflection of his hands on the steering wheel. Calm hands. Controlled hands. The kind of hands belonging to someone who solved problems for a living. 15 minutes later, Ethan pulled beneath the bright lights of an all-night pharmacy. Rain hammered against the windshield while he stepped out into the storm without even grabbing an umbrella. Ava watched through the glass as he disappeared inside the store. She looked down at Lily, whose small face looked painfully pale beneath the oversized tuxedo jacket wrapped around her. "Mommy," Lily murmured weakly. "Who is he?" Ava swallowed hard. "Just someone helping us." But even as she said it, she realized she had no idea why he was helping them at all. Men like Ethan Calloway did not abandon luxury weddings to drive exhausted single mothers through the city during thunderstorms. 10 minutes later, the passenger door opened again. Ethan climbed back inside carrying medicine, bottled water, children's fever reducers, crackers, juice boxes, and a small stuffed rabbit from the pharmacy gift shelf. Ava stared in shock. "You bought all this? You look like you forgot to eat too." He handed her the medicine bag carefully. "There is a 24-hour urgent care about 6 blocks from here. We should get her checked." Ava blinked hard against the sudden pressure burning behind her eyes. "I cannot pay you back for this." Ethan looked genuinely confused by the statement. "I did not ask you to." Lily stirred slightly as Ava measured the medicine into the tiny cup. Her little fingers brushed weakly against Ethan's sleeve while he adjusted the heat vents toward the back seat. Then, half asleep and burning with fever, Lily leaned toward him and whispered softly, "Daddy." Time stopped. Ava froze instantly. Ethan's hand paused on the dashboard controls. Lily's eyes never even opened. She simply rested her cheek against the seatbelt and drifted back to sleep again. Ava felt humiliation rush through her chest so fast it physically hurt. "I am so sorry," she whispered quickly. She does that sometimes when she is sick. She misses. Her voice caught before she could finish. Ethan slowly looked back at the little girl sleeping behind him. Something unreadable flickered across his face for the briefest second. Not annoyance. Not discomfort. Something deeper. Something almost unsettled. Then his phone rang again through the speakers. This time, The caller ID flashed across the dashboard in glowing white letters. Isabella Calloway. Bride. Ethan stared at the screen for 2 long seconds while rain pounded against the roof above them. Then, without breaking eye contact with Lily in the mirror, he pressed decline again. The waiting room of Harborview Urgent Care smelled like coffee, disinfectant, and exhaustion. Rainwater dripped softly from Ethan's dark coat as he stood near the reception desk filling out forms, while Ava sat across the room with Lily curled against her chest beneath the oversized tuxedo jacket. The fluorescent lights overhead cast pale shadows across the nearly empty clinic, and for the first time all night, Ava finally had a moment to breathe. Her hands still shook slightly from adrenaline as she rubbed small circles across Lily's back. Every few seconds, she glanced toward Ethan in disbelief. He looked completely out of place there. Billionaires belonged in private hospitals with marble floors and security teams, not in crowded urgent care clinics beside exhausted parents and coughing children. Yet Ethan waited patiently while the receptionist explained insurance forms to him for the second time. He did not complain once. "You are family?" the receptionist asked politely while typing into the computer. Ava immediately opened her mouth to correct her, but Ethan answered first. "I am here with them." Something about the calm certainty in his voice made Ava unexpectedly emotional. The receptionist nodded with a tired smile and handed him another clipboard. "Doctor should see the little girl soon." Ethan thanked her quietly before walking back toward Ava. Lily stirred weakly against her shoulder as Ethan crouched beside them. "Her fever seems a little lower." Ava brushed damp hair from Lily's forehead. "The medicine is helping." Ethan nodded once before sitting beside her in the plastic waiting room chair. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Outside the large windows, downtown Seattle glowed silver beneath the rain, while ambulance lights flickered faintly in the distance. Ava stared down at her daughter's sleeping face and finally whispered, "You really should go back to the wedding." Ethan leaned back slightly in the chair. "You have mentioned that 3 times. Because your family is probably furious." "They are definitely furious." Ava looked at him in surprise, and to her shock, the corner of Ethan's mouth lifted slightly. It was not a full smile. More like someone remembering how to smile after a very long time. "Then why are you still here?" she asked quietly. Ethan's eyes shifted toward Lily sleeping peacefully against Ava's chest. His expression softened again in that strange, unreadable way she was beginning to notice. "I do not know," he admitted honestly. The answer settled between them heavier than she expected. Ava looked away first. She could not remember the last time someone had spoken to her without pretending. Most people either pitted single mothers or judged them. Ethan did neither. He simply watched, listened, noticed things. "Hey." Nurse finally appeared at the waiting room doorway holding a tablet. "Lily Bennett." Ava immediately stood. Ethan rose beside her automatically. The nurse smiled gently. "Only one parent can come into the exam room." Ava nodded quickly. "That is fine." But before she could step forward, Lily's tiny fingers tightened weakly around Ethan's sleeve again. Her sleepy voice barely reached above a whisper. "Stay." Ava's heart twisted painfully. Ethan looked down at the little girl holding on to him with feverish trust. Then he glanced toward Ava carefully, almost asking permission without words. Ava swallowed hard before giving a small nod. "You can come." The exam room felt tiny compared to the grand ballroom they had left less than an hour ago. Cartoon sea animals decorated the pale blue walls while a children's movie played silently on the mounted television overhead. Lily sat wrapped in blankets on the exam bed while the pediatric doctor checked her temperature and listened to her breathing. "Looks like a viral infection," the doctor said reassuringly. "High fever, but her lungs sound clear." Ava visibly relaxed for the first time all night. She is going to be okay. She needs rest, fluids, and monitoring tonight. But yes, I think she will be fine. Relief hit Ava so hard her knees nearly weakened. Ethan noticed instantly. Without thinking, he reached out slightly toward her elbow to steady her before pulling his hand back again. The small movement lasted less than a second, but Ava still felt it. The doctor handed over printed instructions and smiled warmly at Ethan. "You picked a good time to bring them in, Dad." Silence filled the room instantly. Ava froze. Ethan looked toward the sleeping little girl bundled beneath blankets. Neither corrected the doctor. Something complicated moved quietly through Ethan's face before he finally accepted the paperwork. "Thank you, doctor." 20 minutes later, They stepped back into the cold, rainy night, with Lily sleeping peacefully in Ava's arms again. The storm had softened into a steady drizzle, and downtown traffic reflected across wet pavement like rivers of gold. Ethan opened the SUV door for them quietly. Ava looked up at him beneath the glowing streetlights. "You have done enough already." Ethan studied her face for a long moment before speaking. "Where do you live?" Ava hesitated. "South Harbor." Ethan frowned slightly. "That is 40 minutes from here in this weather." "I know. Then I am driving you home." Ava almost argued again. But then Lily shifted sleepily against her shoulder and whispered one tiny exhausted word that made Ethan go completely still beside the car door. "Daddy." This time, Lily's eyes were open when she said it. The farther they drove from downtown Seattle, the darker the city became. Luxury hotels and glowing skyscrapers slowly disappeared behind them, replaced by quiet streets lined with aging apartment buildings, flickering neon signs, and closed corner stores washed silver beneath the rain. Ethan kept one hand steady on the steering wheel, while soft jazz played quietly through the speakers. In the back seat, Lily slept curled beneath his tuxedo jacket with her cheek resting against Ava's arm. But the words she had whispered outside the clinic still lingered heavily inside the SUV. "Daddy." Ava stared out the rain-streaked window, mortified. "I am really sorry about that," she said softly after several long minutes of silence. Ethan glanced at her briefly. "You apologized already." "She has not had a father around since she was a baby." Ava swallowed hard. Sometimes when men are nice to her, she gets attached too quickly. Ethan's jaw shifted slightly at the words. "That sounds more like loneliness than attachment." Ava looked down at Lily without answering. The truth hurt because it was true. 10 minutes later, Ethan turned into a narrow parking lot beside an aging brick apartment complex near the harbor. Rainwater pooled across cracked asphalt, while an old flickering security light buzzed above the entrance. Ethan parked the SUV, but did not immediately turn off the engine. He stared quietly at the building ahead. Several windows were dark. One near the stairwell was covered with cardboard instead of glass. Ava suddenly became painfully aware of everything he was seeing. "You can stop judging now," she muttered quietly before opening her door. Ethan frowned slightly. "I was not judging you. People always do." The cold drizzle hit immediately as Ava lifted Lily carefully from the back seat. Ethan grabbed an umbrella from the console and stepped beside them without another word. Together they crossed the cracked parking lot beneath the weak yellow lights. The apartment stairwell smelled faintly like old pipes and laundry detergent. Ava climbed slowly to the 3rd floor while balancing Lily against her shoulder. Halfway up, the hallway lights flickered once before going completely dark. "Seriously?" Ava whispered under her breath. "Not tonight." Ethan stood behind her in the darkness for a second before his phone flashlight illuminated the narrow hallway in soft white light. "Power outage?" he asked. "Happens every time it rains hard." Ava reached the apartment door marked 3B and shifted Lily carefully while digging through her purse. After several exhausted seconds, she finally unlocked the door. The apartment beyond was small, dim, and freezing cold without electricity. Ethan remained near the doorway at first while Ava carried Lily toward the bedroom. But even in the darkness, he noticed everything. The patched couch. The tiny kitchen table with one broken chair. Children's coloring books stacked neatly beside unpaid bills. A nearly empty refrigerator humming weakly on backup power. There was no self-pity in the apartment. Only survival. Ava tucked Lily carefully beneath blankets in the small bedroom before returning to the living room. Ethan had already located several candles from the kitchen drawer and lit them quietly across the apartment. Warm golden light flickered softly against the walls. For a moment, the tiny apartment almost looked peaceful. "You did not have to come upstairs," Ava said while rubbing her tired eyes. "I know." Ethan loosened the collar of his dress shirt slightly and glanced toward the dark ceiling. "Your heater is out too. It usually comes back once the power resets." Ethan walked toward the electrical panel near the kitchen. "Usually?" Ava folded her arms tightly against the cold. "You really do not belong in places like this, do you?" Instead of answering, Ethan crouched near the fuse box and studied the damaged breaker carefully under his phone light. "This wiring is old. Everything here is old. How long have you lived here?" Ava hesitated. 3 years. Ethan looked up at her for a moment, almost like he was trying to imagine her life inside these walls. Then quietly, Without another question, he rolled up the sleeves of his white dress shirt and began resetting the breaker manually. 2 seconds later, the apartment lights flickered weakly back to life. Ava blinked in shock. "You fixed it." Ethan shrugged slightly. Boarding school teaches strange survival skills. Before Ava could respond, Lily's sleepy voice drifted softly from the bedroom. "Mommy." Ava hurried toward the room instantly. Ethan followed more slowly behind her. Lily sat up weakly beneath the blankets, her fever-flushed cheeks glowing softly under the dim bedroom lamp. "Bad dream?" Ava asked gently while brushing her daughter's curls back. Lily nodded before her tired eyes shifted toward Ethan, standing quietly near the doorway. Then, without hesitation, she held out one tiny hand toward him. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" The question hit the room with dangerous softness. Ava opened her mouth immediately. "Lily, honey, Mr. Calloway has to leave." But Ethan surprised both of them by stepping closer to the bed instead. "Just until you fall asleep," he said quietly. Lily smiled sleepily and relaxed back against the pillow. Ethan sat carefully on the edge of the chair beside the bed while Ava watched in silence from the doorway. Candlelight flickered softly across the room as Lily slowly drifted back to sleep with one tiny hand still wrapped trustingly around Ethan's fingers. And that was when Ethan noticed the photograph sitting half-hidden on the nightstand beside Lily's bed. A faded picture of Ava several years younger standing beside a man whose face had been torn completely out of the frame. The apartment had grown quiet except for the steady tapping of rain against the windows and the low hum of the heater finally struggling back to life. Ethan remained seated beside Lily's bed long after her breathing softened into deep sleep. Her tiny fingers still rested loosely around his hand, warm and trusting in a way that unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Across the room, candlelight flickered gently against the faded walls while Ava stood near the doorway watching them both with exhausted caution. Then Ethan's eyes drifted back toward the torn photograph on the nightstand. The missing face bothered him immediately. It was not ripped by accident. The edges were jagged, deliberate, emotional. Ava noticed exactly where he was looking and crossed the room quickly before he could reach for it. She turned the frame face down beside the lamp. "Old picture," she said quietly. Ethan leaned back slightly in the chair, studying her expression instead of the photograph now. "You tore him out." Ava folded her arms tightly against herself. "Some people deserve to disappear." The words landed heavier than she intended. Ethan did not push further, but he also did not look away. Ava suddenly felt exposed standing there beneath his calm attention and wrinkled catering clothes with dark circles beneath her eyes and exhaustion written across every inch of her face. "You should go home," she whispered softly. "It is after midnight." Ethan glanced toward Lily sleeping peacefully. "And leave you alone with a sick child after your power already went out once tonight. I have handled worse." "I believe that." Something in his voice almost sounded like admiration, and Ava hated how much warmth that tiny shift created inside her chest. She looked away quickly. Ethan finally stood from the chair, careful not to wake Lily. The little girl shifted slightly beneath the blankets, but stayed asleep. As Ethan stepped into the small kitchen area, he loosened his dress shirt collar further and glanced toward the nearly empty refrigerator standing half open beside the counter. Inside sat milk, juice boxes, one carton of eggs, and leftover pasta in a plastic container. Nothing else. He quietly closed the door again before Ava noticed him looking. "Do you have tea?" he asked. Ava blinked in surprise at the random question. "Chamomile in the cabinet above the stove." Ethan nodded once and began boiling water like he belonged there. Ava stared at him in disbelief. Billionaire CEOs were not supposed to stand inside tiny apartments making tea at 1 in the morning while rainstorms rolled across Seattle. Yet somehow Ethan moved through the cramped kitchen with calm ease, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, expensive watch glinting softly beneath the weak overhead light. For the first time in years, the apartment did not feel lonely. The realization scared her. Ethan handed her a warm mug several minutes later. Their fingers brushed briefly during the exchange, and Ava hated the sudden flutter in her chest that followed such a simple touch. "Thank you," she murmured. Ethan leaned lightly against the kitchen counter with his own mug untouched in his hand. "How old is Lily?" "5. And her father?" Ava stiffened immediately. Ethan noticed the reaction but kept his tone gentle. "You do not have to answer." Ava stared into the steam rising from her tea. He left before she was born. Ethan's expression darkened slightly. Just disappeared? Ava let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Something like that. Silence settled between them again, but this one felt different. Heavier. More personal. Ethan glanced toward the bedroom doorway where Lily still slept peacefully. You have been doing this alone for 5 years. There was never another option. That sounds exhausting. Ava finally looked up at him then, surprised by the softness in his voice. Most people praised single mothers in public, but secretly pitted them in private. Ethan sounded genuinely angry on her behalf instead. You get used to being tired, she admitted quietly. Ethan stared at her for a long moment like he was seeing something no one else ever noticed. Then his phone buzzed sharply against the kitchen counter. The screen lit up instantly with dozens of missed calls and unread messages. Isabella. Mom. Olivia. Board members. Wedding staff. Ava stepped back slightly. You should answer them. Ethan glanced down at the screen, but made no move to touch it. The world survived before cell phones existed. Your family probably thinks you died. My mother definitely thinks that. Despite herself, Ava laughed softly. The sound surprised both of them. Ethan looked at her instantly, almost caught off guard by the rare smile that briefly transformed her exhausted face. And for one strange, suspended second, neither looked away. Then the apartment lights flickered suddenly overhead. The heater clicked off again. A second later, darkness swallowed the room completely. You have got to be kidding me, Ava whispered into the dark. But before panic could settle in again, Ethan's hand found hers instinctively in the darkness beside the counter. Warm, steady, protective. Neither of them moved. And somewhere inside the bedroom, Lily's sleepy voice drifted softly through the dark apartment. Mommy, is Daddy still here? For one suspended second, the apartment remained completely silent except for the rain tapping softly against the windows and the distant hum of traffic outside the harbor. Ethan still held Ava's hand in the darkness beside the kitchen counter, warm and steady, while Lily's sleepy question lingered through the apartment like something fragile that neither adult knew how to answer. Ava felt her pulse stumble painfully in her chest. Honey, she whispered carefully toward the bedroom. Mr. Calloway is just helping us tonight. A small pause followed. Then Lily's tired voice came again through the darkness. But he stayed. Ethan slowly released Ava's hand first. The sudden absence of warmth somehow made the apartment feel colder than before. A second later, his phone flashlight flickered back on, casting soft silver light across the kitchen walls. Ava cleared her throat quickly and moved toward the bedroom before he could see how shaken she felt. Lily lay tangled beneath the blankets with sleepy eyes barely open. Ava sat carefully beside her and brushed gentle fingers through her curls. You need rest, baby. Is he leaving? Lily asked softly. Ava hesitated. She did not know why that question suddenly hurt. Probably soon. But before Lily could respond, Ethan's calm voice came quietly from the doorway. Not until you fall asleep again. Lily smiled immediately, the kind of trusting smile children only gave people who made them feel safe. Ethan remained standing near the bedroom doorway while Ava tucked the blankets more securely around Lily's tiny shoulders. In the soft glow of his phone light, Ethan noticed something hanging beside the bed for the first time. A child's crayon drawing taped carefully against the wall. 3 stick figures stood beneath a bright yellow sun beside blue water and crooked birds in the sky. One figure had long brown hair. One tiny figure held a stuffed rabbit. And the third figure was drawn taller than both of them with dark hair and a blue tie. Ethan stared at the drawing quietly. Lily drew that. Ava followed his gaze and instantly stiffened. She likes pretending. Ethan stepped closer to the wall. At the top of the drawing, written in uneven purple crayon, were the words, Mommy me daddy. Something tightened visibly in Ethan's expression. She does not remember him. Ava looked down at her daughter sleeping beneath the blankets. No, then why draw him? Ava swallowed hard. Because every kid in kindergarten has one. The honesty in her voice hit harder than she intended. Ethan remained silent for several seconds, staring at the childish drawing like it carried more weight than it should. Then his phone buzzed sharply again in the darkness. This time the bright screen illuminated the room clearly enough for Ava to see the incoming message preview before Ethan turned it away. Where are you? The family is panicking. Isabella. Ava stepped back instantly. You really need to go. Ethan glanced at the message briefly before silencing the phone once more. You keep saying that. Because this is insane. Ava lowered her voice, careful not to wake Lily fully. You barely know us. Ethan's eyes shifted slowly back toward her. That does not seem completely true. Ava frowned slightly. What does that mean? Ethan leaned lightly against the doorway, studying her face with quiet concentration. I cannot explain it. His voice lowered slightly. But tonight feels familiar somehow. Ava's heartbeat stumbled again. She looked away too quickly. Ethan noticed. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the harbor while rain streaked softly down the bedroom window. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan's gaze drifted toward the old bookshelf near the corner of the room. Among children's books and coloring pages sat a faded silver program from a corporate charity gala dated 5 years earlier. Ethan froze instantly. He knew that event. Calloway Foundation Winter Gala. He had hosted it himself. Slowly, he walked toward the shelf and picked up the worn program carefully. Ava's face drained of color the moment she saw it in his hands. Where did you get this? Ethan asked quietly. Ava crossed the room immediately and took the program from him too fast. It does not matter. But Ethan was already staring at her differently now. Not like a stranger anymore. Like someone chasing the edge of a memory he could almost touch. You were there, he said softly. Ava shook her head too quickly. Lots of people were there. Ethan's expression darkened slightly with concentration. No, his voice lowered. I remember your eyes. Ava stopped breathing for one terrifying second. The apartment suddenly felt too small. Too warm. Too quiet. Ethan took one slow step closer. 5 years ago, he said carefully, after the gala. I met someone outside the ballroom. Ava immediately turned away from him. You were tired. You were imagining things. But Ethan was no longer listening. Because suddenly, through the cracked memory opening inside his mind, he could almost see her clearly now. Rain. A terrified young woman standing alone outside the hotel. Tears in her eyes. His jacket around her shoulders. And then nothing. Like someone had ripped the ending out of the memory completely. Ethan stared at Ava in stunned silence. Then quietly, almost to himself, he whispered, Why do I feel like I lost you before I even knew your name? The rain finally stopped just before dawn. Pale gray light crept slowly through the apartment windows while the city beyond the harbor remained quiet beneath low clouds and wet streets. Ethan had not slept at all. He stood near the kitchen window with his loosened tie draped across the counter beside him, staring out at the waking city, while Ava sat curled at the far end of the couch wrapped in a blanket she clearly forgot to pull over herself hours ago. Neither of them had spoken much after the conversation in Lily's room. But silence no longer felt empty between them. It felt dangerous. Ethan could still see fragments of that missing memory flashing through his mind every few minutes. Rain outside a ballroom. Ava's frightened face years younger. His jacket around her shoulders. The strange feeling that he had searched for something afterward and never found it. He hated incomplete things, especially memories that felt personal. Behind him, the old coffee maker sputtered weakly to life. Ava had gotten up quietly while he was distracted at the window. It only works if you hit the side twice, she said softly, tapping the machine again until it finally groaned properly. Ethan turned toward her. Morning light revealed how exhausted she truly looked. Her hair had fallen loose around her shoulders overnight, and she still wore the black catering uniform from the wedding beneath the oversized cardigan she had thrown on sometime around 3 in the morning. She looked fragile and strong at the same time. Ethan was beginning to realize that combination was exactly what unsettled him most. Ava handed him a chipped coffee mug carefully. It is terrible coffee, she warned. Ethan took a sip. I have had worse in board meetings. A small laugh escaped her before she could stop it. The sound warmed the apartment more effectively than the heater struggling near the wall. For one brief moment, things almost felt normal. Then Ethan's phone vibrated sharply against the kitchen counter again. This time he finally picked it up. Ava immediately looked away, pretending not to notice. Ethan glanced through nearly 80 unread messages before opening the newest one from his younger sister. You left your own speech to disappear with some mystery woman. MOM is losing her mind. Attached beneath the message was a blurry photo already spreading online. Ethan stepping into the rain beside Ava outside the wedding ballroom while carrying his tuxedo jacket over Lily. Ethan stared at the image silently. Ava noticed his expression immediately. What happened? Ethan turned the screen toward her without speaking. Ava's stomach dropped instantly. Oh my God. The headline beneath the photograph made her chest tighten painfully. Billionaire CEO Ethan Calloway leaves family wedding with unknown woman and child. This is bad, Ava whispered. This is really bad. Ethan looked strangely calm. It will disappear by tomorrow. You do not understand. Ava stood quickly from the couch. People like you recover from gossip. People like me lose jobs. Ethan's expression shifted immediately. You think someone will fire you over a photograph? Ava laughed softly without humor. You have never lived paycheck to paycheck, have you? Before Ethan could answer, a tiny sleepy voice drifted from the bedroom doorway. Mommy. Both turned instantly. Lily stood there clutching her stuffed rabbit beneath oversized pajama sleeves. Her fever finally lower, but her cheeks still pink from illness. Her curls were tangled from sleep, and Ethan felt something unexpectedly warm settle inside his chest at the sight of her. Lily blinked sleepily at Ethan, still standing in the kitchen. Then she smiled. You stayed. Ethan surprised himself by smiling back automatically. Looks like it. Lily padded across the apartment barefoot before climbing carefully onto the couch beside Ava. Then she looked directly at Ethan with complete childlike seriousness. Mommy cries less when you are here. Silence filled the apartment instantly. Ava froze in humiliation. Lily. But Ethan could not seem to look away from the little girl. Children usually feared him, or stared awkwardly because of his money and reputation. Lily simply looked at him like he belonged there. The feeling hit harder than it should have. Ava cleared her throat quickly and reached for Lily's medicine on the counter. You need breakfast first. Can pancakes be breakfast? Lily asked hopefully. Ava smiled tiredly. Not in this apartment. Ethan glanced toward the nearly empty refrigerator again. Then quietly, before he could overthink it, he said, I know a place nearby that serves pancakes shaped like cartoon animals. Ava looked up instantly. Ethan, it is just breakfast. You have already done too much. Ethan held her gaze steadily. I do not think I have done enough. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Ava stared at him in silence while morning light slowly filled the apartment around them. Then suddenly, from the television mounted near the kitchen, a breaking entertainment segment interrupted the morning news. Ethan's face appeared across the screen beside the wedding photograph from last night. The anchor smiled dramatically toward the camera. Sources close to the Calloway family claim the unidentified woman seen leaving with Ethan Calloway may have a deeper connection to the billionaire CEO than anyone realized. Ava's blood ran cold instantly. But what terrified her most was not the headline. It was the way Ethan slowly turned toward her afterward, with realization beginning to darken his expression. Because for the first time since entering her life, Ethan Calloway was no longer looking at Ava like a stranger at all. The apartment suddenly felt too small for secrets anymore. The television continued playing softly in the background while entertainment reporters dissected blurry photographs from the wedding across the screen. Ava stood frozen beside the kitchen counter with Lily tucked protectively against her side, while Ethan stared at her with growing realization darkening his expression more with every passing second. He was connecting pieces now. The gala program. The missing memory. Lily's age. The way Ava reacted every time he mentioned the past. Ava could see it happening in real time, and panic rose sharply through her chest. Turn it off, she whispered. Ethan grabbed the remote immediately and silenced the television. The sudden quiet felt almost louder. Lily looked nervously between them. Mommy. Ava forced a smile that did not reach her eyes. It is okay, baby. But Ethan could hear the strain in her voice now. He stepped closer carefully, as if afraid sudden movement might break something fragile between them. Ava, he said quietly, tell me the truth. Her stomach tightened instantly. There is nothing to tell. Ethan's jaw shifted slightly. You are lying. Lily looked up at her mother in confusion while Ava struggled to steady her breathing. She had spent 5 years building walls around the worst night of her life. 5 years surviving quietly. 5 years making sure Ethan Calloway never found out what happened after that gala. And now he stood inside her apartment looking at her like he already knew half the answer. Mommy looks scared, Lily whispered softly. The words shattered whatever fragile control Ava still had left. Lily, sweetheart, can you go color for a few minutes? Lily hesitated but slowly nodded before carrying her crayons toward the small kitchen table. Ethan waited silently until the little girl became distracted with her coloring pages. Then he looked back at Ava. 5 years ago, he said carefully. Something happened after that gala. Ava crossed her arms tightly. You do not remember. No, Ethan admitted. But I remember enough to know you are terrified of me remembering more. Ava looked away instantly. Ethan stepped closer. Did I hurt you? The question hit her like a physical blow. Ava's eyes snapped back toward him immediately. No, the answer came too fast. Too emotional. Ethan noticed. Then why disappear? Ava laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. Because your world and mine were never supposed to collide again. Ethan frowned. That is not an answer. Ava stared at him silently for several painful seconds before finally whispering. You really do not remember that night, do you? Ethan shook his head slowly. Only pieces. Ava closed her eyes briefly. Rainwater still clung faintly to the apartment windows, while morning light spread softly across the tiny kitchen. After the gala, she began quietly. I went outside because one of your investors cornered me near the ballroom. Ethan's expression darkened instantly. What investor? It does not matter anymore. It matters to me. Ava ignored the interruption and continued carefully. You found me outside crying. Ethan felt the memory strike harder this time. Rain. A frightened woman. His jacket around her shoulders. You stayed with me, Ava whispered. You took me upstairs to one of the private hotel suites because I could barely stop shaking. Ethan stared at her in silence. Nothing bad happened, Ava added quickly after seeing his face. You just sat with me. We talked for hours. Ethan's chest tightened unexpectedly. And then, Ava swallowed hard. And then you kissed me. The apartment went completely still. Ethan looked stunned. Ava wrapped her arms tighter around herself. It was not supposed to matter. You were grieving your father. Your company was collapsing under that merger fight. I was just a junior event coordinator, nobody noticed. Ethan's breathing slowed dangerously. But it mattered to you. Ava laughed softly again, this time painfully. It mattered enough that I spent weeks trying to convince myself it was a mistake. Ethan ran one hand slowly through his hair, trying to force the missing pieces together. Why did you disappear? Ava's eyes filled instantly, but she blinked the tears back before they could fall. Because someone made sure I did. Ethan froze. What does that mean? Ava walked toward the kitchen drawer slowly before pulling out an old worn envelope she had clearly hidden for years. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed it to him. Ethan opened it carefully. Inside sat a check for $50,000 made out to Ava Bennett. And beneath it, a typed note. Leave Seattle. Do not contact Ethan Calloway again. Ethan's blood ran cold instantly. Who gave you this? Ava's voice broke softly for the first time all morning. Your fiancé. Ethan looked up sharply. Olivia. Ava nodded once. She found me before I could find you. Ethan stared at the check in disbelief while anger slowly darkened his entire expression. I never knew about this. I figured that out eventually. Ethan looked back down at the note with trembling fury building beneath his calm exterior. She told me you would ruin me if I stayed, Ava whispered. And when I found out I was pregnant 2 months later, her voice cracked completely. Ethan stopped breathing. Slowly, almost afraid of the answer already forming inside him, he looked toward the little girl coloring quietly at the kitchen table. Lily glanced up innocently and smiled at him without understanding anything happening around her. Then Ethan turned back toward Ava with devastation beginning to spread visibly across his face. Ava, she could barely hold his gaze anymore as tears finally slipped silently down her cheeks. I never wanted her to grow up feeling unwanted, she whispered, especially by her own father. The apartment remained completely silent except for the faint scratching of crayons against paper at the kitchen table. Ethan could barely hear it over the sound of his own heartbeat. His daughter. The realization moved through him slowly at first, then all at once so hard it nearly stole the air from his lungs. Lily sat only a few feet away coloring rabbits onto a paper placemat, while Ava stood across from him, trembling quietly beneath years of exhaustion she had carried alone. Ethan looked back down at the old check still clutched in his hand. $50,000. A payment to erase a woman and a child from his life before he even knew they existed. Something inside him shifted dangerously. Olivia knew, he said quietly, almost unable to process the words himself. Ava wiped quickly at the tears on her cheeks. She found me outside your office building 3 weeks after the gala. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. And she told you to disappear. She told me your career would collapse if the media found out. Ava's voice shook softly now. She said your father had just died. Your board was already questioning your leadership. She made it sound like loving you would destroy you. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Shame hit him harder than anger somehow. Because while Ava had spent years surviving alone, he had been standing beside the woman who caused it without ever knowing. Lily suddenly looked up from the kitchen table. Mommy. Ava instantly forced another smile despite the tears still clinging to her lashes. What is it, baby? Lily held up her drawing proudly. I made pancakes. Ethan looked at the crooked yellow circles colored across the page, and something inside his chest cracked completely. 5 years. 5 birthdays. 5 Christmas mornings. 5 years of scraped knees, fevers, bedtime stories, and nightmares he never knew existed. Ava noticed the devastation spreading slowly across his face. Ethan, he looked up at her instantly. Why did you not tell me after Lily was born? The question was not angry. That somehow made it hurt worse. Ava wrapped her arms tightly around herself. I tried. Ethan froze. What? Ava walked quietly toward the kitchen drawer again before pulling out an old cracked cell phone. She opened several saved screenshots with trembling fingers and handed the phone toward him. Ethan stared silently at dozens of unanswered emails sent years earlier to his executive office account. Subject lines filled with desperation. Please read this. I need to speak to Ethan. It is important. Please. One message simply read, your daughter was born today. Ethan's blood ran cold instantly. I never saw these. I know. Who blocked them? Ava shook her head weakly. I stopped trying after a while. Ethan stared at the screen with horror slowly spreading across his expression. Someone had erased her. Completely. The realization hit him harder with every passing second. Ava had not abandoned him. She had been pushed out of his life deliberately while he remained blind enough not to notice. Lily climbed carefully down from her chair and wandered sleepily toward them, holding her crayon drawing. Mommy is crying again, she whispered sadly. Ethan immediately crouched down to her level without thinking. Hey. Lily looked at him with wide, uncertain eyes. Ethan's throat tightened painfully. She had his eyes. The exact same gray-blue color his mother used to say looked stormy whenever he was upset. How had he not seen it sooner? Did I make Mommy sad? Lily asked softly. Ethan glanced up at Ava standing silently beside them before looking back at the little girl. No, sweetheart. His voice nearly broke on the last word. None of this is your fault. Lily studied him for one long, thoughtful second before carefully placing her drawing into his hands. You can keep it. Ethan looked down at the crayon pancakes and crooked smiling stick figures while emotion closed painfully around his chest. Then Lily climbed trustingly into his arms like she had known him forever. Ethan held her automatically, instinctively, like something inside him recognized her before his mind ever caught up. Ava covered her mouth softly as tears finally escaped again. Ethan looked over Lily's small shoulder toward Ava standing in the weak morning light of the apartment. I missed everything, he whispered. Ava shook her head quickly. You did not know. I should have. The honesty in his voice shattered whatever distance still remained between them. Ethan slowly stood while still holding Lily carefully against him. Then he walked toward Ava one step at a time until only inches separated them. I cannot change the last 5 years, he said quietly. But I swear to you right now, no one is taking either of you away from me again. Ava stared at him in stunned silence while Lily rested sleepily against his shoulder between them. Ethan reached up slowly and brushed one escaped tear gently from Ava's cheek. Outside the apartment window, pale sunlight finally broke through the storm clouds over Seattle Harbor for the first time all night. Then Ethan's phone buzzed once more against the kitchen counter. He ignored it completely. Because for the first time in years, Ethan Calloway finally understood why walking away from that wedding had felt so necessary. It was never a mistake at all. It was the first step back toward the family he had unknowingly been searching for all along.